All right, man, welcome back to the God Center Men's Recovery Show. If you are a Christian man, you're in recovery, and you want to live the abundant life and thrive inside of a discipleship, you have come to the right place. So I'm glad that you're here. So today's a special episode. I had a couple of thoughts that came on my mind after reading a quick article, and I wanted to share some of those thoughts and revelations with you. So what we're going to talk about is the imposter syndrome. Can a Christian have an imposter syndrome? Is there such thing as a Christian imposter syndrome? If you're not hip to this new lingo, I'm going to explain what it is, but I like to say first that I don't accept any new lingo or idea that comes out and immediately accept it. I take a look at it and I kind of look as far as biblically, is there an example? Have I seen this played out in my life? Does it feel like it's true? And so I'd like to say that first before we move on. But a imposter syndrome, this is defined as this. It is a psychological term or pattern in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, and or accomplishments, and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud or an imposter. And so with that definition, we are going to dive into how this might begin to manifest in our life. But inadequacy and self-doubt, where does this come from? We're going to answer some of those questions. But can a Christian be an imposter? Now, I remember having feelings of being these feelings of fear and inadequacy, and sometimes they still take place inside of my life, especially when I fail to measure up to a standard that I prescribe or that I talk about. So here's the reality, that we all at some point could be in this mindset or could develop a mindset of hypocrisy in not really practicing what we preach. There's anybody who is vocal about anything and teaches anything knows that there are times where we don't live up and we don't measure up to the standards that we are talking about. And so that being said, there's this gnawing sense of fear of being found out or talking about a topic that you haven't personally mastered yourself and saying, you know what, I really don't got this topic down. And I'm not really fully walking in the full effects of this topic, but yet you might talk about it, or you might teach, or you might train other people in that area. And this gnawing fear of being found out that you haven't really got it all figured out yet. Now, I find that to be completely normal, and I see it manifested in my own life. So when I think of this imposter syndrome, I do see how it can play out inside of my own life. But inadequacy, self-doubt, where does this come from? And so, biblically, I see it since the beginning of time. And that is, I see it in the garden. I see it in Adam and Eve, mostly Adam, manifested in these inadequacies, self-doubts, blame shifting, running from the presence of God. I see, all of this fear-based nature manifested since the beginning of time. So when we talk about this imposter syndrome or living in fear or having some sort of inadequacy, we must come to the conclusion that this is a human experience, and that there is going to be a time where I'm going to feel like that I'm not living up to my own standards, or that I feel like that I'm somehow inadequate and not able to do what God has called me to do. So, that being said, I can't do stuff for God until I get it all together. Now, this is the manifestation of the imposter syndrome in full effect. And I see it manifested in men's lives, and it comes in this form. I will serve God, or I will do this for God, whatever mission that He has for us. I will do this once I blank, right? once I quit pornography, once I stop lusting, once I got my addictions under control, once this, that, and the other thing. And what it all correlates to is that I got to have my stuff together before I do anything. And this is definitely a fear of the imposter syndrome, right? You don't want to be seen as a hypocrite. You don't want to step out and begin to do what God has called you to do while you still have personal defects and all of these different things. But this is the core strength of the imposter syndrome, because you're never going to really have it all together. Now, the reality is that I don't have it all together, right? And any expert that comes to you on a certain topic and they're talking to you about a certain thing, they might be a master in that subject because they have thoroughly thought about this and thoroughly thought about the application to their own life. But that doesn't mean that they have it all together. And especially in this addiction journey, me being a fellow believer who has struggled with addiction just like you. And that is that I have my own temptations and my own struggles and my own triggers and the own things that I go through. And if I am waiting until I get it all together to begin to be an encouragement to somebody else, the fact is that I'm never going to be an encouragement. I'm never going to give the revelation that I have been given and give it to somebody else if I have to have it all together. Now, I think that is the great danger of this imposter mindset is really pushing off the things. And it comes to the bottom line is, I don't feel like I'm in a place to talk about that. I'm not feel like that I've arrived on some place where I got my wings, and that I'm somehow extremely anointed or that God is using me in some miraculous way and that I am free from all these personal defects so I can begin to do what God has called me to do. The danger, you'll never get to that place. You'll never be at the place where you feel like you have arrived. And once you do, the Bible says that you're headed for a fall. So getting out of this imposter mindset of that we have to have it all together, I think is highly, highly beneficial. It goes a step farther in this, in that you feel like you're not saved because you're not perfect. And that you feel extreme failure when you fall short. And that is you bust out the club and start beating yourself up. And the very relationship with God and salvation and going to heaven and all of these different things becomes attached to how good we're doing. And the reality is that this is a dangerous place to live, because sometimes we behave well and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we appear like we got it all together and things are rocking, and sometimes we don't. The reality is that life is a period of different things that you will experience. I can guarantee you, if you have a loved one died, you're not going to have it all together. If you have a sickness or something, a mental health issue that's taking place in one of your children, you're not going to have it all together. Okay? And all of these different things that come to life, maybe you're experiencing a drought, a financial drought, where you're going through a period that it's time to sow now. It's time to make deposits. It's time to work hard, and the results are going to come later. So you may be in a period of struggle at this moment. And I can tell you, if you're in that period of struggle, you're probably not going to have it all together. And so there are very few times in our life where we actually have it all together. And so if we base our relationship with God, okay, He loves me because my recently good behavior deserves His love, and I feel good about myself, and therefore, I'm okay. Well, just wait till the moment when you're not okay, where your behavior doesn't line up to your own standards and you fail and you fall short, and there comes a period of time where you don't have it all together. Now, this is the roller coasterness of this imposter mindset that is directly dependent upon our behavior. And that is this daisy pedal Christianity. He loves me not. And when I'm doing well, I'm doing good, I'm meeting His standards, He loves me. When I fail and fall short, I lose my temper. I give into a lust or a temptation or something like that. He loves me not. And just a crazy, crazy way to live. The third one, you feel fake around someone you view as a superior, right? And this is the danger, because the imposter mindset, when it gets around somebody who is superior, who seems like they have it all together, that only makes you feel worse. And I remember when I first started out teaching the Bible that I got invited over to somebody's house and I gave a lesson, and I prepped for a good 2 to 3 weeks on this topic, and I was thoroughly knowledgeable about what I was talking about, and I came to about every single ins and outs that I possibly could. I put a lot of time into it. And after I gave the topic, one of the persons pulled me to the side and says, I have read that before and I never got any of the things that you said. And it makes me feel inferior. And it makes me feel like I'm not close to God. And the reality is that I put a lot of time and effort into gleaning every single piece of truth that I can so I can show up prepared that day, only to have it have the opposite effect of making somebody feel unworthy and feel like that they're ignorant because they've read that 1,000 times and never got anything that I said from that, and they felt dumb. Okay, and so this is what happens with the imposter syndrome, that we get around people who are far superior and know what they're talking about, and all it does is cause us to feel more inadequate and more fear and more of this imposter syndrome coming out. So, feeling fake around your superiors. Next one is minimizing your accomplishments. Not really understanding that the effect that you might have. Now, I know, like, inside of this, that sometimes we don't really know the impact that we have. Somebody can listen to one of my topics here, and something can click inside their mind, and something can radically change, and or it can be delayed, and they can experience 6 to 9 months from now the root of that belief, and their life can radically change, right? And so looking at your life, it's radically minimized. And that is, you don't feel like you have an effect on people. You're constantly downplaying your accomplishments. And it's rooted in all this insecurity of this imposter fraud mindset. So it has thoughts of, I'm such a hypocrite. It has thoughts of having the fear of being able to perform as expected. It has a fear of being unqualified, and all of these things. So I begin to ask myself, as I looked about these different traits, I've seen them manifest in my own life, so I concur that this message is definitely relevant inside of recovery. I've seen it in my own life. And then I begin to ask myself, what biblical character have I seen these traits manifest in, that they feel this imposter syndrome? And so I found Moses to be highly relatable to this subject. And I'm going to explain to you why here in the rest of this talk. But we see inside of Moses highly this imposter syndrome. And as we know the story, that the children of Israel were in bondage to Egypt, and it was time for them to be delivered, that God had heard their cries, right? And God raised up Moses for that time to be used as the instrument, as a tool to bring about his purposes. Now, in this conversation that God has with Moses, he goes into the complete... He just vomits out this imposter syndrome. And we'll start with Exodus 3:11. He says this, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" Now, Moses must have been looking at his past and looking at the damage that he caused, as we know that he murdered an Egyptian earlier in his life, and basically was a convicted murderer. He did this deed. He thought he was justified and vindicated in what he did. But at any rate, he had a complex involved with who he was as a person. And that is the who am I syndrome, right? And I find this to be a common response in humanity when God offers them a mission, right? Most of the biblical characters that you see, whether it be Isaiah, connecting with God, and is like, woe is me, I'm undone, I'm unclean, like all of this stuff. He begins to recognize his inadequacies. When you go to Gideon, you go to all these different people, you see this common response of imposter syndrome when faced with the mission that God has. Who am I? Who am I to be able to do this, right? He goes on, and then in verse 13 there, he says, and then Moses said to God, indeed, when I come to the children of Israel, and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they say to me, what is his name? What should I say to him? And what Moses was saying here is like, who am I first and foremost? If you're going to get somebody to do this, you should get somebody who's extremely qualified. And that is somebody who has all the talent, all the skills, and all the resources enough to pull this off. Like, you should go find that person, because that's not me, right? So you see the fear, the inadequacy, and everything that's coming to play in Moses' life. And then he says, what am I going to say to them when they ask me these certain questions? And the bottom line of the fear was that I don't have all the answers, which correlates to I don't have what it takes. Okay? And so we see that syndrome, we see that pop up inside of our lives. We see the mission that God wants to, and say, you know what, that's for somebody else. Like, you need to get somebody who's extremely qualified, who can handle that. And not only that, I don't have all the answers. I don't have what it takes. Okay? That's the imposter syndrome here, number 2. Number 3 goes, then Moses answered and said, but suppose, this is funny, he's having this conversation of God, and he's saying what if scenarios. Okay? But suppose they will not believe or listen to my voice. Suppose they say that the Lord has not appeared to you. Okay? So this goes into the doubt of the people. This goes into an insecurity of my own personal leadership skills. Once again, inadequate and fear-based, that I don't really have what it takes to pull this off. Okay? And he's thoroughly communicating that my leadership skills are not to the place where I'm going to be able to accomplish this. So number 3 was, I doubt my leadership skills, they're not up to par. Number 4, then Moses said to the Lord, oh Lord, I'm not eloquent, okay? Neither before or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow to speech and I'm slow of tongue. What he was basically saying there is correlating to his leadership skills, that he is not charismatic. He doesn't have a stage presence like all of these other people, okay? And that he's not very persuasive. And the bottom line is to all of this is that he says, I kind of suck, okay? My speeches are not very persuasive. My communication is kind of slow. And basically I suck, and that I'm not a good public speaker. Surely, you could find somebody who speaks better than me to accomplish your purposes and your task in this world. So, number 4, I don't have enough charisma to pull this off, right? And lastly, he said, oh Lord, send by the hand of whoever else you may send. So, he's saying this. There are plenty of others that could do it better than me. Okay? Plenty of others that can do it better than me. What I want to point out here is how normal the imposter mindset is and how true it really is, okay? First off, when he said first explanation to God, the first thing in this imposter mindset was, who am I? Okay? Who was he? Like, who even cares about him? Like, he was in the wilderness for 40 years. Did anybody miss him? I don't think so. So his doubts and his fears were based in some sort of reality. Who was he? Like, who is this? Like, talk about insignificant and not worthy of much attention. Who is he really? And so what I want to point out here is how the imposter syndrome is a completely normal feeling, and that his arguments are, they were probably rooted in some sort of fact, okay? He goes to number 2 and says, I don't have what it takes, right? And he's right. Who is he? He doesn't really have what it takes, and that is, he doesn't have all the answers. He goes into his leadership skills. They're not up to par. Probably right. Was there a person who had more charisma, more stage presence, had the ability to speak better than he can? Probably. And when he said, finally, sin by somebody else because there's somebody else who could do it better than me, the reality was, he was probably right. So in all of these things, the imposter syndrome shows up and says, you know what? I'm inadequate. I'm fearful that if I take this stance, if I take this position, if I become a leader, that I'm going to be exposed as a fraud, that I don't have the talent that they think I have. I don't have the skills that they think I have. I don't have the knowledge that they think I have. And I definitely don't have the education and the experience that they think I have, right? And so all of these things are going to come into play, and it's completely natural to feel and to think these things. And the reality is that there is somebody better than me that can be doing this. There is somebody who is more educated than me that has already done this. And that there is somebody who has more stage presence and more charisma and all these things. That's all true. And when it comes to education and inadequacies, I feel it. I know it. It's true. So where do I go from here? I come to the conclusion of this, as that the imposter mindset is a real thing, and that in spite of my leadership skills, in spite of all the ways I might be inadequate, in spite of the ways I might look to in fear, right? In spite of all the ways that somebody might be better than me and can do it better than me, despite all that, I'm going to come to the conclusion that I am going to do what God has called me to do. And that is an embracing of this imposter syndrome. And that is, though I might be fearful, I might be inadequate, I may not measure up at times, but I'm still going to walk in it because that's what God has called me to do. You see how important that mindset might believe to us. And it's grasping this final truth. And it comes from the New Testament. And that is 2 Corinthians 3:5. Not that we are adequate in ourselves to consider anything as coming from ourselves, but our adequacy is from God. So we look at the imposter mindset and all its fears and all its inadequacies and all its excuses that we see manifested in the life of Moses. And we say, and we come to the place that I recognize and I understand that the adequacy It doesn't come from me, in my educational background, in my lineage, in my DNA. It doesn't come from any of those things. But the adequacy that I have that makes me overcome the imposter syndrome is the adequacy that comes from the Spirit of God moving and operating in my life. That's it. It's done. It's over. I can accept it and I can move on with the power of God operating inside of my life. All right, brothers. Peace.